Good evening everybody. This is now the 6th video that I'm making, and the first video was the introduction. Then there were 4 videos about policy, and now I'm doing a translation of policy video, and then I'm going to talk about law, and then I'll do more translation, and then I'll do commentary, and then I'll do hidden messages. Don't know if you can see, but Joey is on my lap. He's decided to come and take part in this. I've also got a new microphone, the 3rd microphone I'm trying. So you can see Joey here. It's Saturday evening, so I'm not in work clothes. I've been at my desk since 6 o'clock this morning, sorting out lots of things that I've got to be sorted out in life and getting ready for the next part of life. So tonight what I want to do is I want to talk to you about a person that I met online. I've never met her physically. Her name is Barbara Rudek. She worked for Sharp in the 2000s, and then again now she's back there, and she's a policy expert. And what happened was that in 2008 in November I was invited to Parliament, where about 40 people were present in a particular committee room, and the feed-in tariffs were announced, and we all thought that it was really going to happen, and that small-scale embedded generation would be included. And then when the feed-in tariff came out in March or April 2009, firstly photovoltaic was excluded, and secondly it was only for systems above 1 megawatt. And by then I'd already spent 300,000 Rand preparing for being ready for renewable energy. I'd already been researching renewable energy since 2004 and building energy systems and testing them since 2008. And I kind of knew what was going on, hence why I was invited to Parliament, because I already knew MPs and other people in the industry who invited me, and I got it from the horse's mouth, as it were. And then we waited another 6 months, and PV was included in the so-called feed-in tariff, but now there was no, it was still above 1 megawatt, and so small-scale embedded generation, SSEG, was still excluded. And then after that, the next year after that, South Africa changed to the British standard, renewable energy certificates, which was a tender program. And what was actually strange about that was that Britain had spent 20 years trying that program, and that hadn't worked, and they just changed the feed-in tariff system. And the feed-in tariff system was invented by Dr. Hermann Scheer and his buddies in Germany in the 1980s, sorry. And then it was sorry, Joey is now on the floor. Okay. And then it was promulgated and made law in 1991 when the feed-in tariff was introduced in Germany, and but Britain decided to have a tender system. And of course, a tender system is not going to work in this kind of process, because what needs to happen is that everyone needs to be paid the same, whether they're a government institution or a private institution, because the feed-in tariff has to cover the costs plus cover the costs. So if I'm going to install a system for 100,000 Rand, then I need to make sure that my costs are covered. And in fact, Germany went further than that, because they said we have avoided costs, and if someone spends 100,000 Rand, Germany said, well, the utility would have had to spend 30,000 Rand, therefore we're going to give that 30,000 Rand straight back to the user. So as soon as someone installed a system and the system was certified and went live in Germany, they immediately got a rebate of 30% of their system cost, and then the balance was paid with a feed-in tariff. So what happened is that Barbara Rudek in sometime in 2009 phoned me on Skype or whatever, or got hold of me on the internet when we chatted, and she said, David, what's happening with feed-in tariffs? And I said, well, it's been introduced, but it's kind of greenwashing, because the government says they're going to do it, but they're not really doing it, and let's look at the document that Barbara then sent me. I'm just going to pause for a second and let Joey out. Okay, we're back online. I had to let Joey out, and then we make water here. I had to go check the water system and the pumps, they're all running. And we're going to get to about embedded generation. I've already said at the beginning that I believe that the reason why there's no load shedding, electricity load shedding at the moment, and that there's no real water rationing and real short, I mean there's water rationing, but there's no water switch off, is because of the huge amount of embedded generation and embedded storage that's been introduced into the system. Okay, this is the first time I've paused video, so we'd have to see how that works. I'm going to switch now to the picture. Okay, so over here it says in 2009 I met Barbara Rudek. She actually found me online due to my prolific writing about renewable energy, small-scale embedded generation, SSG, SSEG, etc. She said that she had spent years at Sharp working with the South African government on the refit, and she wanted to know what was happening and why all the delays. So SSEG, small-scale embedded generation, and refit, renewable energy feed-in tariff. I was so happy when Barbara got hold of me, because now I actually had someone in the industry who was a specialist, a policy expert, and someone who helped South Africa bring renewable energy into law. As it says here, even more sun for South Africa, Sharp promotes integrating solar PV into renewable energy law. South Africa is one of the first African countries to introduce a renewable energy feed-in tariff, refit, along the lines of the German system, increasing energy requirements, high CO2 emissions, the threat of power failures, and the desire to meet the government's renewable energy targets has caused a rethink of energy supply policies. Solar PV, the renewable energy technology offering great potential, has not as yet been included in the refit. That is why solar power pioneer Sharp is advocating its inclusion into refit as the best energy source for the future. So, my feeling is at the time of this, Pravin Gordhan was overseas trying to get money for Medupi, South Africa's newest big coal power station, and in order to get the money, he had to say to the world, South Africa is going to put in renewable energy, and so it was greenwashing. Unfortunately, I didn't know about greenwashing at the time. I had to read Dr. Herman Shear's book, The Solar Economy, a couple of years later to actually find out that governments make announcements that they have no intention of implementing, which is most unfortunate because the government, South African government has done it, the Western Cape government has done it, the ANC have done it, the DA has done it, and it's very bad for entrepreneurs and it's very bad for investors. South Africa's hunger for energy continues to increase as the economy is growing and people's living standards are rising, says Peter Thiel, Executive Vice President of Sharp Energy Solution Europe. Shortages in energy supplies are looming, while power station capacities need to be expanded. But South Africa still relies heavily on coal, ensuring that 40% of the greenhouse gases produced in Africa are emitted by the continent's southernmost nation. The refit was above 1 megawatt, no SSEG and no PV, as I've said. So the refit came out in about March or April 2009, when people like me had spent hundreds of thousands of rand getting ready. I spent a month in America. I went to 2 conferences. I spent a week on a course. I wrote an exam. I was ready to install, and then it didn't happen. And then it says, following the refit announcement, RUNESA is now looking at adding other renewable energy sources to the list, including solar PV, and the government is responding. And then Barbara Rudek, who spoke to me, says in this document, we're very optimistic that solar PV will also be included in the feed-in tariff over the coming months. And Barbara is the manager of government policy affairs, Sharp Energy Europe. We can see the advantages of such promotion in Europe, where there are now 19 European countries relying on renewable energy and promoting solar power with feed-in payments. This has resulted in positive socio-economic effects such as the creation of jobs, added value on a local level, as well as a significant reduction in carbon dioxide emissions and consequently an improvement in quality of life. The German renewable energy law set an example. All important changeover to other energy sources is feasible and above all can be financed. In order to ensure the same kind of success in South Africa, we're working together with highly qualified specialists in the country itself. This enables us to take a rapid, concerted approach to local needs in accordance with our slogan, Think Global, Act Local. "40 countries worldwide had followed Germany's example," and then it talks about Sharp for 50 years being in the energy industry, renewable energy, photovoltaics, and especially, and in 2010 the company will put the world's first gigawatt production facility in operation in Sakai, Japan. And we were allowed to reprint this free of charge and copy and paste and so on. And this is the guy that wrote the paper in conjunction with Barbara Rudek. I think it's important to note that even Sharp and Barbara were saying, well, it's about the renewable energy industry. But actually it wasn't about that. It was about the jobs that could be created because of the renewable energy industry. What we've known is that from 1890 till 1970, the price of electricity from coal, oil, gas, nuclear, hydro constantly decreased. But from 1970 onwards, because of all kinds of reasons. For example, flue gas desulfurization, so-called clean coal, massive amounts of energy being expended on cleaning up coal, cleaning up mountainsides, cleaning up mines, cleaning up power stations, cleaning waste. Because of all those externalities that were now factored into the cost of energy, energy prices from coal, nuclear, oil, gas, and hydro and so on started increasing for the first time in 80 years. And at the same time as this, from 1960 onwards, the price of photovoltaic electricity and wind energy was coming down. And so 1 watt of PV panels, photovoltaic panels in 1960 cost $60. It's easy to remember. 1960, $60. And now I've just bought at a retail price in South Africa at 5 Rand 10. And if I just divide 5 Rand 10 divided by 16, I've paid 32 US cents for a watt of PV panels in 2019. And the price has come down from $60 to 31 US cents, which is unbelievable. And in that time, the price of PV power has decreased and the price of so-called normal power has increased. And so we find that we have so-called alternative energies, solar, wind, water, wave, river, and they're called alternative energies, but actually the alternative energies are nuclear, coal, gas, hydro, because we've always had river power, we've always had barges that could float down a canal or float down a river and get taken back up by big horses with tow paths. The tow path was called the tow path because the horse towed the barge back up the river or back up the canal. And then we've always had wind energy. For example, we had ships that ran on wind energy, and then we had the Dutch excuse me, who discovered the first windmills, and then they put that into production with textile factories and so on. And that was the first use at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution of water power and wind power to thresh and make yarn straight in what's called carding in textiles and wool production. And then we've always had solar energy. I mean, solar energy heats the earth. Solar energy creates the wind in the first place. Solar energy cools, depending on where it is. Solar energy creates night and day. Solar energy created the earth. So solar and wind and wave energy. Anybody who's done body surfing or surfing waves, wave jumping, kiteboarding these days, knows about wave energy. Anybody who walks on the beach knows about wave energy. And these are the original energies. They're not the alternative energies. They're only alternative because the big utilities want to be in control. And the main difference, and the point I want to leave you with here, is that so-called normal baseload power of coal, nuclear, gas, oil, and hydro are centralized, allowing big utilities and big monopoly capital to be in charge. Whereas so-called alternative energy, renewable energy, in a household scale, is embedded in the grid, at my house, in my garden, on the beach, in the sea, local. The production and the consumption is local. And therefore, the power is made and produced in a decentralized way. And in a communist country like South Africa, where the government wants all the money to flow via the center so that they can take their rent, a nice way of saying commission, extortion, corruption, but let's just call it rent for now. If all the energy goes via the center can take its rent. But if all the energy stays on the outskirts, in the towns, townships, villages, communities, suburbs, cities, then the government can't collect their rents anymore. And so corruption will be eliminated, and embedded energy will save us. Thank you very much.